Good morning, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our great sponsors. Another flag is coming. Let's give them all a round of applause. And especially our team that we forgot to talk about this morning, Fleur, for that great breakfast. Let's give them a round of applause. So I think our panel is getting ready to start coming up. Working together to define success in the Indo-Pacific, our first panel is entitled Greater Than the Sum of Our Parts, Integration of All Domains for the Coalition and Joint Campaign, moderated by Jarman J.B. Blanton, Vice President, Business Development for AeroEnvironment Incorporated. I'm Lieutenant General Retired Leslie Smith. I'm the Vice President for Leadership and Education here at AUSA. And I work for General Brown. We have so much fun, and we're glad to be back here at Land Force Pacific 2024. JB has served as a Vice President for Business Development of AeroEnvironment since 2023. He's held various leadership positions and roles within AV to include managing flight operations, training and logistics programs, and as the Senior Director and Market Segment Lead for domestic markets. We won't hold this against him, but he's an Air Force veteran where he served as a combat controller. And he's a lawyer, too. I don't know how you put those two things together, but that's good. He earned his JD at Birmingham School of Law, graduating magna cum laude.
Wow.
Yeah, that means he's pretty smart. And his Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from the University of Southern Mississippi, graduating with highest honors. Let's give our moderator a round of applause.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the introduction. It threw me off a little bit. I thought I'd have to do my own bio. But just in the spirit of this discussion, greater than the sum of our parts, integration of all domains for the coalition joint campaign, there's really a lot to unpack there just in that title. And I think we absolutely have the right panel to do that. I did ask a general friend of mine who's moderated before, some piece of advice, and he said, less of you and more of them. So in the spirit of that, we'll go to the panel. To my immediate right here is Lieutenant General Brunson. He's the Commanding General of First Corps. America's First Corps is the Army's operational headquarters for the Indo-Pacific. To his right is obviously General Hodney. General Hodney serves as the Director of Futures and Concept Center within Army Futures Command. Thank you, sir, for being here. Next to General Hodney is T.X. Hamus. He served 30 years in the Marine Corps. He earned a doctorate at Oxford and is now a distinguished research fellow at the National Defense University. And last but not least is Ms. Marcia Holmes, who served a 20-year career in the Army as a civilian, and prior to moving to OUSD R&E last year, she is now the Principal Deputy to the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Mission Capabilities. So thank you, panel, for being here. I think we'd like to start with the group, some brief opening remarks, and we'll start with General Brunson, sir.
Yeah, I'll be very, very brief in that I didn't graduate from Oxford. I graduated from Webster University and Hampton University for my undergrad. So those are my letters. I would tell you that the letters I'm most familiar with as I look at this region is JPMRC, the Joint Pacific Multinational Regional Training Center, the combat training center that we have out here in the Pacific. Joint Interior Lines, or JIL, those are letters that are important to me. And then another thing that I think about quite often, along with those two things, about ways that we get after things here, is the fact that we have this land power network, the LN, that is absolutely critical to everything that we're going to accomplish in this region. General Flynn is fond of saying that this is not a maritime or an air theater. This is a joint theater. Right. And everything that we do is inherently joint as we continue to campaign through the region. As the First Corps Commander, I have the great opportunity to be with a great many of the friends here, whether that's CK from Singapore and others who I've known over time. What we do here really matters. General Stewart, it's great to see you as well, sir, from Australia. The things that we're going to accomplish of significance in this region will take all of us working together. And I'm thankful for my small part that I get to play in it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. General Hodney, over to you, sir.
Thank you. So I'm going to
speak a little longer than X just because I want to highlight, I'm going to talk about experimentation. And I hopefully get everyone excited about experimentation. You know, listening to General Flynn's opening comment about, campaigning with land power and what you talked about in terms of the joint environment, even the experimentation we do is very much joint and combined. So I'm from Army Futures Command. I'm here on behalf of General Rainey. I think Command Sergeant Major Hester is somewhere in the crowd there. And where General Brunson and his corps are focused on one of the chief's focus areas is warfighting. Army Futures Command is focused on continuous transformation. And the Army Futures Command mission is to transform our Army to ensure future war-winning readiness. That time horizon for transformation, there's the near-term transformation in contact from now to about 24 months. Then there's the deliberate transformation, which is over the FIDEP, about 2 to 7 years. And then there's the concept-informed transformation that covers beyond that. And in this theater, we certainly get a lot of value out of experimentation. There's no shortage of complex or adaptive problems that warrant looking at that through a lens of experimentation. I do want to highlight, we just finished, it's so March of 2024, it seems like a lifetime ago already because we're driving already into the next Project Convergence, but just a few months ago, we wrapped up Project Convergence Capstone. It's certainly our capstone event. We did it in 2 phases. We did it at Camp Pendleton, California, which was largely the broader joint experimentation. We informed the combined joint all-domain command and control efforts, integrated offensive and defensive fires, and certainly did a little bit of contested logistics. And then we did Part B at the National Training Center, which focused on joint forcible entry operation. We did core battle handover responsibilities. We also did a lot of experimentation on human-machine integrated formations. And lastly, the next Project Convergence is right around the corner. It's inside 10 months already. We're going to do that one forward and distributed in theater is the goal, and tied in with our joint teammates. And the goal is to do it right here in Indo-Pacific. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Dr. Amos.
Always a pleasure to be here at AUSA. Good reminder of how big the U.S. Army is. I just finished Rich Atkins's book, Guns at Last Light, which gives you a feel for really the huge volume the Army can put out. We're supposed to talk about how you tie this all together. And I think the problem is we're seeing a revolution in all domains and joint and combined. The only time in history you can look at that looks like this is between World War I and World War II, where you have the old domains of land and sea being revolutionized, some of them being dragged kicking and screaming into the future, air with a big fight over what air should be, and EW largely getting ignored. So not a lot changes. Today what's happening is we have the 4 old domains plus new domains of space and cyber. And so we're having to try to tie them together. At the same time, we're all smart and many are challenging the few and exquisite. We have built a service since about the 1980s based on ever more exquisite, but fewer because they're expensive weapon systems. Best in the world, but expensive. What we're seeing in Ukraine is $400 drones killing $10 million tanks. We're seeing $100,000 long-range drones pursuing strategic bombers and killing them at their home bases. So we're seeing kills at long range by ground forces. As General Flynn said, ground forces reach out now. And the other thing is sea power. Drones and missiles launched from the land drove the Russian Navy out of the Black Sea. When you look at the geography of Asia, much could be said for potential to deny the South China Sea. EW has become a key domain, and I don't think we're spending enough time and effort on that. Space, the explosion of commercial space surprised people. It shouldn't have, because there are 9,000 satellites in orbit now, looking at the planet 24 hours a day, and by 2030 there should be 100,000. So what does it mean for allies and friends? The good news, if you're a relatively small state, you will get equivalent power cheaper. Today, anybody who can buy 4 missiles in a container can either put it on land or on a small ship at sea and kill any ship at sea. That's a huge change. So small states can inflict. Defense on air, land, and sea, defense is becoming dominant, which is good for us. We're on a defense. In space, cyber, and EW will remain contested. Land reaches out thousands of kilometers now. The Navy is just beginning to adjust that, although the Chinese have been telling us this for a decade or more. But now small things like multi-domain task force, the Marine Corps' adoption of missiles means we can kill them at range. The problem we're going to have tying this together is everybody's on a different timeline. The time to marshal for land forces is months to possibly years. And the time to marshal cyber forces can be years to get in place. But execution on land is months to years. Cyber is microseconds. You've got the same problem. You try to match up space and EW. And so how do you make your planning timelines work together? I think that's going to be the huge challenge for planners. The other thing is reliability of the domain. You have a pretty good idea what your kinetic domains do, what your percentage of probabilities are. With a place like cyber, you really don't know until you flip the switch. Did they patch their software in the last hour? If you try to experiment and ping it to see, you probably reveal your attack. So we've got that problem. Then you got the reliability problem of EW. Did they change their waveform? Are we doing something different in the last 2 minutes? Because the cycle in Ukraine right now is 2 weeks between you get something new and the enemy figures out how to counter it, and that's compressing. So solutions. One of the things we got to do is rethink doctrine. Do we need a combined air operations center? When a land battery commander outshoots the JFAC, should he have to call back to South Carolina to get permission to shoot? Or is that an obsolete concept? So we've got to figure out how to do this with complex timelines. And then we've got to relook at the global integration cell that the Chairman Dunford set up, because some of these systems are going to be one-time use systems, particularly in space and cyber. Who decides this theater commander gets to use it and makes that decision quickly enough? Under law, SecDef does, but he doesn't have a staff that does that for him. So we got to work that out. We've got to learn to fight disconnected, although we're talking about JADC2. We'll all talk together all the time. We'll all be happy and friendly. The fact of the matter is it's not going to happen. We've got to figure out how to fight disconnected. Fight better connected and fight disconnected. And it's about weapons, not platforms. We've got to stop focusing on very expensive platforms and look at the weapons that are launched. A cruise missile coming off a merchant ship is every bit as deadly as a cruise missile coming off a billion-dollar frigate. In Ukraine today, they are building drones at the rate of 50,000 per month. The goal is 1.2 million this year. Following year, they hope for 2 million drones. You as a ground commander have to think, how will I move, shoot, communicate with 1,000 active hunters overhead? And on that happy note, I'll leave it.
All right. Well, you know, I'm from OSD and I'm here to help. No, seriously, that really is true. I'm humbled to be a part of this esteemed panel, really. I've worked with a lot of these organizations over the years, developing long-range hypersonic weapons, mid-range capability, directed energy, the things we've got in the fight today that really solidifies the Army's position in the Pacific, and I am humbled to be a part of this team. When I was offered to go to OSD, I went just to get insight into this panel's focus area, right? Integration and joint coalitions and joint campaigning. And the first briefing that I got when I was at OSD was on the long-range kill fires web. Now, I don't know if you've seen it. It's a pretty much of a spaghetti chart just for the services that we have today. And then you go and add our multi and allied partners, and it just gets even more complicated. So I quickly learned that modern warfare is really becoming less about singular service platforms and more about combinations of systems that we can rapidly develop and compose into more effective warfighting constructs. And the Department of Defense is really getting after some initiatives over the past 2.5 years to really develop some multi-domain solutions to strengthen peace and stability in this region. And I'm excited to share some of those with you. We have what we call Rapid Defense Experimentation Reserve. We were just talking about that in the green room with General Hodney. It's an opportunity for us to kicked off in 2021 as a Deputy Secretary of Defense priority, and it's an opportunity just for accelerate prototypes, experimentation, and for technologies that can really rapidly be fielded to address joint warfighting gaps. It gives us a campaign of experimentation that we'll talk more about through the Army's Army Futures Command. It gives us an opportunity to go out and experiment with solutions and that could fill multi-domain gaps. It goes beyond evaluating those individual capabilities for service-specific requirements, and it focuses on providing some analysis and evaluations of how that technology actually closes the joint warfighting gaps. Those projects are selected in coordination with the services, with our combatant commands, our joint staff, industry. We all get a vote on how we want to resolve these joint problems. In our first year, we've looked at advanced UAVs, we've looked at unmanned surface vehicles, we're looking at loitering munitions, decoys, resilient comms, radars, getting after a lot of joint problems. And then they were taking them, partnering with projects like Project Convergence, Bal-Catan, Valiant Shield, and we're developing those CONOPS and TTPs that we need as we rapidly pull out technology for what we might need. This year, radar projects will assess operations and contested logistics. In 25, we'll come back to continue assessments to support regional deterrence. And in 26, we're already working with our service partners to look at space and collaborative multi-domain autonomy. General Brunson, you were there, I think, when we fielded long-range hypersonic weapons to the First Corps. So I acknowledge your equities in the department's Joint Fires Network, which is also led by our organization. Joint Fires Network is a MNC prototyping effort that's going to develop a battle management platform and display real-time fused actionable threat management across all of our geographically dispersed commanders and our allied partners, and that should address Indo-PACOM's top priority right now. We did a demonstration of JFN 0.5 in December of 23. JFN 1.0 will achieve initial operational capability this year following radar experimentation in Valiant Shield. And we're well on our way to transitioning that to a program of record through our service partners. Another initiative that we have ongoing is called AppFit, Accelerate the Procurement and Building of Innovative Technologies. It's procurement funding, and a lot of people don't know about this available procurement funding that's out there for the services. And it's for small, non-traditional companies that have proven something, demonstrated a capability, and the services just need some time to get across that traditional POM process. So it keeps those small businesses going that otherwise wouldn't have the capital to stay afloat while we work through the POM process. So I really would be happy to share more information on that. 22, we got $100 million and we awarded 10 projects. 23, we were at $150 million, we ordered 11 projects. In 24, we had an appropriation of $300 million in procurement funding. So I'm from OSD, I am here to help. So beyond these initiatives, I would say that, our biggest strength in this area is with our allies and partners. AUKUS, a lot of people have heard about the relationship between Australia and the United Kingdom. We're accelerating advanced technologies. We're working together. It has two pillars, Pillar 1, Pillar 2. MC, mission capabilities, is more closely aligned with AUKUS Pillar 2. We're looking at a lot of uncrewed autonomy work with the Australians from the seafloor to the stratosphere. Specifically, we are looking at them participating in some of our experimentation and then us participating with them in Autonomous Warrior 24. And in September 23, OSD R&E entered a partnership with the Japanese Ministry of Defense. We signed a Defense Science and Technology Cooperation Group. We believe there's a lot of opportunity to explore new frontiers of defense S&T, collaboration and experimentation with Japan to bolster our interoperability here in the Indo-Pacific, and further continue to strengthen alliances with the Philippines, the Republic of Korea, all of our other national partners here in this region. So as you hear throughout the week, the Department of Defense is committed to the integration of all domains for the coalition and joint campaign, and we truly believe that the U.S. military and the alliances are greater than the strength of their parts. And thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. That's great. So I did see that there's a questionnaires flowing through. The panel does want it to be collaborative, so if you have questions or comments that you'd like the panel to address, please send those forward. I do have some prearranged questions already. We'll start with General Brunson. General Sirk, I wonder if you could talk through nested objectives with a region that covers 2 oceans. How do units that operate below the strategic level plan and execute operations that nest with our nation's overall goals for the Indo-Pacific?
Well, thanks for the question. I think first it starts with looking at the National Defense Strategy and what it tells us we're supposed to do. One of the things that USERPAC continually challenges the Corps to do at the operational level is to ensure that we remain nested. And if you look at that slide, I didn't know that was going to come up now, but that's the way we try to nest our ways. So one of the things General Flynn talks about is we've got 3 ways here within USERPAC. And my Corps contributes to those, but I'm also tied between 2 different commands, FORSCOM and USERPAC. So the way that we look at this is there are some things that are inherent to a Corps that's CONUS-based that we have to do. But more importantly, it's the things that we do to support that integrated deterrence. And for us, it's assuring friends, partners, and allies that we are going to be there, that our presence means that we are out there to compete. Between 8 to 10 months out of the year, the Corps finds itself forward in the region. And when we're in the region working alongside friends, partners, and allies, what we're trying to drive is deep human interoperability. We're trying to refresh ourselves on our procedural interoperability by way of how do you fight? We have great opportunities to do that. In the future, you'll see us at Yamasakura, where we'll not only conduct a warfighter, but we'll be with our Japanese partners or our Australian allies. And we'll be forward in the region. And you know, when you talk about experimentation, bring the things to us to experiment on because we're in the region. There are certain frictions that occur within the region that don't occur at the National Training Center. They don't occur at Fort Polk, Louisiana. They don't occur out at 21 Palms. I mentioned that for you, sir. They occur in the region. And when we capture these reflections from the things that we're doing, that nesting becomes even more important because what I'm able to do at an operational level is pass to that headquarters, USERPAC, the things that we're discovering about our partners and other ways and investments we might make in the future. Every year that I've been in command over the past 3 years has been different in terms of the partners that have shown. There's this coalition of the willing that's coming together because we're all aiming toward a free and open Indo-Pacific that is setting itself contrary to what General Mick Ryan, who's sitting out there still, I believe, calls authoritarian collusion. We're setting ourselves absolutely against that. So I don't know that I answered your question. I kind of said what I wanted to say, which is we are absolutely nested with everything that not only the National Defense Strategy is saying, but more importantly, what the U.S. Army Pacific is attempting to accomplish, a heady thing that they're trying to accomplish in the region. And then the Corps finds itself absolutely involved at every step of the way, whether we're at home or whether we're forward. We're trying to ensure that our partners know that we are not transactional. We're absolutely engaged with them all the way forward.
Very good. So I do want to pause after if anybody ever wants to weigh in so I don't just cut off the panel. We've had a lot of talk, General Hodney, about experimentation, and I wonder if you could just talk through the difference between experimentation and an exercise. They seem to get conflated sometimes. I'm not sure that, maybe for me at least, explain the difference.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Charmin. I appreciate the shout out to experimentation from my wingman X here, and Marcia, appreciate that. Your reference to Valiant Shield, certainly, I think Colonel Promotable Zach Miller is probably in the room. He commands my Joint Modernization Command, and he's responsible for his team's responsible for supporting our joint experimentation that occurs both in Europe and in the Pacific right here. So, but there is a distinction that I think we need to just make sure folks are clear on from experimentation and exercises. One, exercises are focused on accomplishing a mission. Experiments generally examine problem statements, complex adaptive problems I talked about. Exercises are focused on, readiness, unit readiness, training readiness today. Experiments, the readiness benefits we might not see till a future down the road. So there's things that we got to take a look at there. There's, training objectives define the scope of exercises as opposed to experimentation objectives and learning demands. What do we want to learn? We might get something wrong. It might be a hypothesis we're testing an experiment that, you learn, okay, that's not going to work. Next year we need to adjust it in the experimentation, so we need to do that. Exercises also have a degree of free play. We want part exercises, the benefit of it is leaders get to test the full range of their capabilities and make decisions along the way, whereas in experimentation, the use cases and the threads we're trying to experiment probably have a little more specificity to them to make sure we walk away with the data that we wanted to get from the experimentation. There's a benefit to doing experimentation forward, which is exactly what General Rainey's driving to. Camp Pendleton was great. We brought, joint and combined teammates at Camp Pendleton. You can walk from one tent to the other and see where we needed to adjust things to learn from each other. But if we get forward and distributed in theater the way we're going to fight, we'll certainly benefit from some experimentations there or objectives there. But that's really the fundamental difference. There is a difference. So we can experiment on top of exercises, but both the exercise director and the experiment director have to agree on kind of what those learning demands and training objectives are right up front.
Got it. So now that we understand what it's experimentation, how do you link or build upon past experiments to move forward for the future fight?
Yeah, no, there's a taxonomy to experimentation, certainly. There's levels of experimentation. I would argue they're all informed by the future, Army warfighting concept, because again, experimentation is about future readiness. So how are we employing these, capabilities in support of our future concept? Things that spin out in the transformation and contact are certainly beneficial, but frankly, if they're shovel ready to go into formations, there's probably less experimentation and more integration that's involved in that. So we experiment routinely on our concept. It's called our Future Studies program. We're building simulation that's tied to that. Project Convergence is not a one-time event. It's a persistent experimentation pathway that occurs throughout the year. Again, I said earlier, it occurs both in Europe and in the Pacific, and the capstone event is the one that really brings the collection of best of breed capabilities that are ready for experimentation. And then even below that, we have Army future warfighting experiments that occur at our centers of excellence across the Army, and that's probably a really good entry point for industry to bring technologies they want to experiment in to that particular experiment.
Thank you. So bring Dr. Hamas in. You talked about the domains earlier and how there's distinct timelines between preparation, execution, and reset. I wondered if you could, and maybe this is a question for the entire panel, each of the domains has its own reliability issues, and for example, maybe cyber won't work if the enemy's patched that vulnerability. So what's the approach as we adapt in our planning processes moving forward to cover those areas and those gaps?
Yeah. I think this is important. We define between innovation and adaptation. Innovation is a peacetime process. You have time and no money. Adaptation is a wartime process. You got no time and they're throwing money at you to fix it. So you kind of got to be ready to transition between the two. With something like that, the experimentation may be the single most important thing. And I think experimenting in theater gets to the issues that you don't get when you do it. You have to start with a walk stage, somewhere where you can control it. Everybody's on the same base. You can walk back and forth. Then you get out into the real world and you try it. And as the Corps mentioned, each time you're going to get a different set of players. So that's vitally important to have a continuing process. And then the planners have to work through it, and you have to let it be free play. One of the great dangers I picked the period between the wars because that's where the innovation was coming. The services has exceeded naval aviation permitted failure. They said, we're going to fail a lot of times. The Army, with the great exercises in Louisiana, got partway there, adapted some, there was some resistance up. The Air Force, or the Army Air Corps at the time, bluntly, I think failed because they refused to let the concept fail. The tactical school was all about strategic bombing because strategic bombing was necessary to create a separate Air Force. They said the bomber will always get through. The fighter pilots going, no, we catch you every time. And the bomber pilots, they're saying we can hit it from a pickle barrel at 25,000 feet. And the bomber pilots are going, hell, I don't know if I hit the right state. But the hierarchy said, no, we must have this succeed. And that's what we got to have. That's why it's important here. Senior leaders clearly in theater understand we got to fail sometimes. And when we fail, we have to adapt. That's where I'm seeing a process in the joint system where we continue to invest in god-awful expensive systems like the F-35 and the carrier with very low probability of return as you move into the new domain of weapons, not platforms. And I'm more than happy to do the numbers on that, and they are eye-watering and painful.
Thank you. Ms. Holmes, there's quite a few questions about the AUKUS piece that you brought up in your opening, so I'll probably combine a couple of these and hopefully answer the question. So would you elaborate on the significance of the AUKUS partnership and its impact on advancing the capabilities in the Indo-Pacific? And then this question in particular wants to, if you could focus on the AUKUS 2 pillar, or Pillar 2 rather, to ensure that the allies and partners outside the US, Australia, UK may benefit from the advanced technology development as well.
Yeah, so sure. So this whole thread on experimentation is really critical, I think, to technology development and failing fast, and I'll get to AUKUS as part of that. So the joint experimentation that we're doing through OSD is really bringing in all the different services to look at maybe a service solution, but you'd be surprised how you might bring a Army solution to the table and a Marine would say, you know, I might use that just a little bit differently. Same with our allied partners, right? AUKUS, and AUKUS is bringing, it's a very strong relationship right now. We kind of set out together on this ambitious mission to really just strengthen our industrial capacities. And how do we share information across our defense innovation ecosystems? And there was two critical efforts, as you said. There was Pillar 1 and there was Pillar 2. Pillar 2 is where we are more closely, mission capabilities is more closely aligned with AUKUS. And that really is an opportunity for us to bring our advanced warfighting capabilities to experimentation together, and see how we actually pass data, share data, process data, how we experiment with one another across those networks, across those multi-domain networks that we're going to find so critical when we get into this environment that we're in. We are focused on uncrewed autonomous systems right now in our first increment with Pillar 2, with AUKUS Pillar 2. They are coming to witness our technology readiness exercise this fall, and then we are going to turn around and participate with them in Autonomous Warrior in 24. It's going to be our first opportunity to demonstrate international collaboration through experiments with uncrewed maritime systems, and we believe this model will be extensible to all of our other allied partners in that region.
Thank you. This is one for the whole panel. We'll start with General Brunson. I think this is a pretty common question as a Corps commander. What keeps you up at night when you think about the PACOM theater and your biggest concerns?
There's a personal and a professional answer to that. The personal answer is that General Flynn's going to call me. That keeps me awake sometimes. I don't get much sleep because of that. Really, to honestly answer the question, here's what I think about. What TX sort of alluded to is the interwar years and the time that we have available to prepare for the next thing. In our history, we haven't done interwar well. We've decreased the size of our forces. We've stopped the experimentation necessary to continue to innovate during peacetime. And we find ourselves cast into adapting as we come into the fight. That keeps me awake at night. We have this unique opportunity to cement the land power network as it exists now. We have a unique opportunity right now to ensure that land power remains a preeminent concern of folks in the theater who recognize that this is a joint theater that will require joint and combined solutions. If we don't realize those things that to those of us in the room are readily apparent, that keeps me awake at night. We only have so much time that we can be engaged at the levels that we're at before we come to the end of our time. And woe to us if we look back and say, if I had only made that association, if I had only made that call, if I had only made that invite, if I'd only experimented in the region to test our new and emerging capabilities against an adversary. That keeps me awake at night. There are more days behind me in the Army than ahead of me in the Army, and that keeps me awake at night.
Thanks. I think I would boil it down to two words, urgency and coherency. And what I mean by that is I'm the director of Futures and Concepts. The Army Warfighting Concept looks at 2030, 2040. The new Joint Warfighting Concept is looking at 2040. And frankly, if I drove up the hill to Schofield Barracks and started talking to one of my old formations about 2040, all of the leaders and soldiers in that formation's eyes would glaze over, because that's not the time horizon those soldiers are thinking about. But there's an urgency, clearly. I mean, the recent Army structure message, our Struct 2529, kind of on paper defines the Army, through 2030. It's 2529, and if the time it takes to, research, experiment, prototype, build, and field, that if there's new capabilities we identify in our experimentation, we've got to begin that work now, or else it won't be in formations by the time 2040 rolls around. So there's an urgency to this space, and you can feel it, at least in Army Futures Command and our experimentation endeavors, and the scenarios that TX mentions. You certainly see in today's dynamic battlefield certainly warrants the urgency that we're looking at. On coherency, we saw robotics and autonomous systems platoons working side by side, UK and US. And how we use and employ those technologies are different. So coherency, what lessons are allies and partners or services learning on capabilities, and how are we sharing that so we're not plowing the same ground and we're not learning lessons when we need to be sharing those lessons in experimentation events like Project Convergence Capstone. Things may not be shovel ready, but we're learning a lot about robots and robotic, employment, human-machine integrated formations. And as we're all on our own paths of discovery, sharing those lessons in a coherent manner, because time's not on our side, quite frankly. 2040s, in my space, 2040s might as well be tomorrow.
Thank you.
I think the thing that scares me most is we're spending most of our money on the wrong stuff. We're buying really expensive stuff. A carrier and its air wing costs $23 billion. That's just purchase. That's not operating costs or O-clubs or all the other stuff you need to support it. For $23 billion, the Chinese could buy 20,000 anti-ship cruise missiles, and I'm betting one of them gets through. And then put them in containers, which everybody's doing now because you've got to hide your stuff. Well, you can't kill all the 20-foot containers in the Pacific. So we're buying wrong there. The Air Force all the services are doubled down except the Army on the F-35. GAO says the F-35 cost is $130 million per airframe. But the 8,000 operating hours at 40,000 an hour is another $320 million. So one F-35 costs you $450 million is your long-term investment. Except full mission capable rate right now is 29%. So you got to buy 3 to do what an F-35 is supposed to do. $1.35 billion for one airframe. We can't do that. On the other hand, the Chinese are buying drones that for $100,000 are GPS independent, fly 1,500 kilometers, or about twice as far as an F-35, and are GPS independent and runway independent. They launch off the back of a truck. So again, when you figure the cost of your airframe and your carrier, you've also got to figure out how much is going to cost me to defend it from really cheap stuff. And we're on the wrong end of that cost curve. And we just keep digging deeper. So another happy note to end on.
That is pretty scary. No, so what worries me? Well, so it started with that long-range fires kill web that I saw that looked really scary, and then I saw an integrated air and missile defense kill web that doesn't look any less scary, and then we start talking about offensive defensive fires, and it really gets scary in a hurry, and then start adding your multinational partners in. But I think what scares me the most is where are we on sharing data? Where are we on sharing data? Cross-service sharing of data, cross-country sharing of data. How do we actually get data in that we're going to be allowed to process, allowed to action, and in a format that we can actually process through all these advanced technologies and capabilities that we're building? are we experimenting with those kinds of things? And how are we getting after a really joint integrated fight with our allies and partners? And that takes us here, it takes our other service partners, and it's going to take policy. It's going to take a lot of help for us to be able to process that enormous amount of data that's going to be available to us on the battlefield, in the modern battlefield, in my opinion.
Can I just pile on that? So thanks for unintentionally teeing that up, because I would say that was one of the main components of our experimentation in Project Convergence capstone, was that, right now we have boxes talking to boxes systems. They've multiple cross-domain solutions, and we experimented with ways to, significantly reduce that. And there's policy things we certainly have to work with when it involves allies and partners and so on. Sensor effector linkages was one of the key components. The history of Project Convergence, for those that are unfamiliar with it, when I was a CFT director, the Soldier Lethality Cross-Functional Team, Project Convergence was born of a bottom-up fellow CFT directors that said, hey, we got to connect sensors and shooters in the Army. That was the recognition right there. And General Murray supported the first Project Convergence. Ross Kaufman was the architect behind that. And now where we're at, it's no longer an Army solo, it's an Army-hosted joint experiment. And the scale, I think we were connecting sensor and shooter for maybe 2 targets in the first Project Convergence, and now we're, well over 1,000 inbound tracks that are passed.
Absolutely.
Across services, across allies.
Absolutely.
And partners, and it's pretty powerful. So we're also partnered with CDAO, OSD's Chief Data and Artificial Intelligence Office. Their Global Information Dominance Experiment. So I think we're heading in the right direction, but I agree with you. There's a lot of work that has to be done in this space to get this right.
Yeah, and I think Joint Fires Network is really doing a lot for that. And I think once we can start rolling that out and start experimenting with Joint Fires Network, we can only improve that sharing of information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think one of the chief challenges that we're going to have in this region, though, is we're not NATO out here.
Yeah.
There is a network that they can operate off of in NATO. And when we talk about the Joint Fires Network, what we're going to require out here is a sea Joint Fires Network. Because the sea is part of our asymmetric advantage that we have out here in the Pacific, is this network, this land power network that exists out here. And if we don't think about sea solutions, combined solutions out here, we're going to find ourselves in a world of hurt. So whether you talk about a mission partner environment or a network which allows for the sharing of the data, which is absolutely necessary for us to exist, it goes back to what you said earlier, ma'am, about policy. How do we share intelligence out here? What is the best way? There are a host of bilateral and multilateral agreements that exist out here.
Exactly.
But we've got to get clarity on that. So I would add that to a thing that keeps me awake at night. How long is it going to take us to get to some baseline where we operate, not either unilaterally or bilaterally, but all laterals?
Exactly.
I guess, is that even a
Multilateral.
word? Multilateral.
But I've got a
Webster University.
I've got a concern there that we tie these systems together, but the sheer numbers that are coming and the need all the way down to the low level. We've got to free junior commanders to go ahead and fire and not wait. Now, junior commanders, a question. Regimental commanders are going to have ISR that goes out hundreds of kilometers because they're going to need to, because they got to see as far as they can shoot. So who deconflicts airspace? Who gives permission? Allies will have anti-ship cruise missiles ranging well out there. How do we sort that? And I think we have got to work the very delicate balance of top-down control and mission orders. And although we've preached mission orders for decades, we're really not very good at it because we got a personnel system that tends to be actively hostile. And so that's going to be a piece we have to work. We've got to make room for the relatively low-level commanders, all the way down to platoons, are flying multiple drones in Ukraine. And they're lethal drones. So, and some of them are autonomous now too. So we've got to work through that process. I mean, Ukraine has said this thing has just exploded. The numbers of things that will be in the air at any given time that can kill you is 2 orders of magnitude higher than it used to be. And the range obsolescence is one huge problem. Any armored knight could kill any peasant any time, except then the peasant got a crossbow. Not an expensive weapon, but a weapon with better range. Well, unfortunately, the peasants have crossbows now. We got to figure out how we're going to deal with that.
So I just want to go back one step, because this question is tangentially connected to the data question that you were talking about, or point you were making, Ms. Holmes. And this is directed to OSD and Futures Command, General Van Antwerp. How are you accounting for the need to share technologies, AI and autonomous features in particular, with our foreign partners? And with the desire to protect aspects of the technologies, especially when you use them or make them useful, we must divest them or train partners on them, as they apply to military sales, FMS, et cetera.
Go ahead.
Yeah, FMS is not in my portfolio, Jeff, so I'll just simply, Project Convergence, Capstone, we're seeing, I think I described the incorporation of allies and partners into that particular experiment. And again, these capabilities are not foreign military sale ready in a lot of cases. We're experimenting with artificially enabled platforms, some of which are not ready to go, but we're learning alongside our partners. Again, the theme of this panel is sum is greater than its parts. We're seeing that in spades in every one of our experimentation events. But I'll have to defer to our acquisition teammates when it gets to the point when those are ready for fielding.
So I'd say autonomy and AI are probably one of the top topics, technology focus areas that most of our allies and partners want to get together and discuss and lean forward in, because there's so many different approaches to it, and there's so much development going into it across multiple services and multiple partners, and I think that we're going to have to again come back to how do we share that information, how do we share some of those algorithms that we're all developing, so that we know as we interoperate how they're going to respond, as we share command and control of autonomous platforms out there, there has to be some understanding of what we're developing and the level of autonomy that we're going to develop, and what rules and policies we're going to put in place, and then what they will allow for their services as well, and their platforms.
And I also think what's sharing across theaters. I know it's not NATO out here in the Indo-Pacific, but what's happening in Europe with secure but unclassified, encrypted, type policies. In terms of eventually, if we can get to zero trust, not just internal to services and across services, but in a combined manner where folks can plug into networks when we know you've met certain expectations. Again, that's a policy thing that I think will help.
That'd be a game changer.
I'm a little bit concerned that our thought process in this is very much rooted in the period from 1939 to 1989, where great technical advances came out of DoD labs.
All right.
But prior to that and after that, the great advances are coming from kids in labs.
Yeah.
Prior to World War II, most of the great advances that were needed came from commercial labs, and it was the military asking would share it with us. And I think we've got the same point. 3 weeks ago, they had a competition, said, can you design me a GPS-independent drone that self-targets? And 3 students got together and came up with a $500 drone that essentially uses Tomahawk-type navigation based on Google Earth. So maybe the question isn't what should we share, is how do we reach out and make it open source so that everybody's in on it? Because everybody's developing this. There's over 100 drone companies now in Ukraine. 2 years ago, there were a few drones flying. Next year, there'll be 1 million, and many of them will be GPS independent and increasingly autonomous. So maybe the answer is not looking in, but looking out.
The good news is we're doing that. Modular open system architecture, General Rainey would say, our industries are United States superpower, and partner with universities. Carnegie Mellon University is artificial intelligence work. The AFC's Artificial Intelligence Integration Center is partnered with Carnegie Mellon. Some of the technologies we saw came out of that program. The unmanned aerial system strategy is modular. Again, modular. You talked about, I think it was weapons, not platforms. That payloads payload, agnostic type, whether it's EW, whether it's fires, whether it's, ISR type capabilities as a modular payload that can be applied on aerial unmanned systems, ground unmanned systems. That's certainly the direction we're going.
We're talking a lot about experimentation and how do you pull stuff and autonomy. And one of the things that Ms. Shue is really focused on is what she's calling a modeling and simulation big play. And it is going to be a development environment at multi-level security where that industry, our allied partners, our services can come into this environment and bring advanced technologies and test it in the labs and decide, is that investment worth it? And does it really move the needle? So besides just these extraordinarily expensive experiments that we run, we need those tools available to us with validated threat models. This will have validated threat models. We'll use the service platform models, and it'll be an opportunity for industry partners to come in and do work within this collaborative environment to say, yes, we are working on the right things and we're investing our research and development money in the right places to move the needle.
I was waiting for you, sir, if you had a thought there.
No, I was gonna, I don't know. It's kind of one of the things that I think we need to do better is take best advantage of the wargaming that is going on so that we can get to better illustrative scenarios, that we might get to better requirements, that we might get to better understanding of the capabilities necessary, that we might organize ourselves better. At a very, very low level, we talk often about the need to stop tearing off paragraph 1 of the op order and sitting it to the side. We've got to organize ourselves differently for the challenges that are ahead. And there's a reticence a great many times to organize ourselves differently, to think about what might actually be required. But that's going to require a whole of DoD coming together and understanding what the actual theater requirements are based on plans, based on thoughts, based on assumptions being made. I think that would start to change that. So while we might do those technical things, we need to do the same thing on the more pedestrian operational side of things as well to open this up, to start thinking about what we might get from this asymmetric advantage that we have. What are the assumptions these nations are making? We often talk here about the geometry of our geography based on long distances. But as we begin to look at every nation that's involved in this land power network, we start to consider every nation being a vertice. And you go out from that vertice and you have these lines of communication that exist to make this network amongst all these nations. And we have to start looking back at that vertice and say, what are the impacts on this nation? How do we need to be organized to take best advantage or make best advantage of the contributions they're making in the region? Heretofore, at least at my level, we haven't fully done that as well as we could. And so we've committed ourselves to trying to look at things differently. Sometimes I saw a map in Japan recently that was east up, and it was looking down, and it was a cap.
Oh, yeah.
And I understand that to make it absolutely plain to me. First island chain, I understand that now. There are so many that say they hear FIC or First Island Chain, they go, oh yeah, I know where that is. But if you ask them to point it out on a map, they couldn't. Now, I will tell you, to be fair, 5 years ago, I could not either. But I can now. And it's important in terms of communicating not only to our partners, allies, and friends, but having them communicate back to us.
Yes.
But we've got to lay that flat. We've got to war game that. We've got to think about and challenge assumptions that have been long held. And we'll do those things technically with the technology because we have to, because there's an investment there to be made. But I would respectfully submit that there's an investment to be made in these partnerships as well. It's got to be taken just as seriously.
Another question from the audience. How do you balance modernization and readiness? Both take time and resources. Modernization requires secret, and readiness requires campaigning and communication with partners.
Yeah, therein lies the dilemma. It's a great question. I mean, in the end, it's all, to Marcia described, the future operating environment defines our approach to the new Army warfighting concept. And that concept will yield, a number of concept required capabilities. And frankly, in some cases, if you agree the future operating environment, and no one has a crystal ball, but we can certainly extrapolate based on the trajectory of warfare. You have to invest in a manner that yields those concept required capabilities. It goes back to my comment about urgency and coherency. If you only focus on today's readiness at the expense of tomorrow's readiness, that could have disastrous strategic outcomes for the nation and our allies and partners. So it's certainly a tough balance.
But this is where the weapons or payloads rather than platforms get you there, because if you accept a weapon as an expendable, and therefore doesn't have to be 99% effective and bring the crew back. But maybe I can buy a cheap one that's 60% effective, but because I can buy 10,000 of them, it doesn't matter.
Right.
If 40% of them wander off and do something else, it's okay. And then you mentioned, sir, on the first island chain, I think the thing to realize is the key terrain in the first island chain is really the 9 exits. If China can't get out those 9 exits, her economy collapses eventually and her fleet can't fight. The widest of those is only 100 miles wide. Most of them are much, much narrower. So ground forces, including allied ground forces, can dominate those because you're hunting a target in land in a complex urban or mountainous terrain that looks like a container truck. I mean, the Estonians just bought Scania trucks, a standard Scania 8x, with 4 missiles in the back. Until you roll that lid back, it's a delivery truck. That gives us a huge advantage for ground forces can bottle up the naval forces, or if the Chinese want to fight through its enormous expense in a very, very difficult terrain, and we have all the advantages. That's where I think the land power piece out here is incredibly important for the strategic goal. A war with China probably won't be short, and it will be won by economic exhaustion, because we're not going to occupy China. Economic exhaustion comes from cutting off trade. And the Army and Marine Corps are probably the best suited to do that effectively with our allies, provided the allies want to get in that game. But then the ranges aren't all that long.
All right, change of course back to Ms. Holmes here. How are you, or OSD rather, integrating the defensive industrial base and the Pacific industry partners in their future exercises? What is OSD's message to industry leaders here today at the conference?
So we have a number of initiatives that we fund that actually go out in partnership with the services. We do nothing without our services that go out and find mature technology. We bring it into experimentation and we demonstrate it with the services for applicability to their operational mission. My message to the industrial base today is get it out there. Get it out there. Let us see it. Show us the utility. We're offering experimentation avenues for you to come in and show us what is available. Make it available, make it affordable, be able to deliver on promise. If you promise that you can deliver it today, deliver it today. Don't promise something that you don't have capacity to produce. I think I've told some of my industrial partners, it's a double-edged sword, right? You come out and you perform and you show that you've got promise. You have to be able to deliver on that promise, right? So you have to have that. We have tools to help with that availability. We're building that modeling and simulation environment. It's blue box black, as we're calling it. You can come in and see how you play in a multi-domain environment. Do you have something that you thought you could sell to the Army, but it's really good for the Navy? There's opportunity for industry to join the fight with us in this environment.
And there's a question here for General Hodney. It's the same question. It's how does industry get in that? What's the avenue for them or the venue?
Yeah, so I described, the Army Future Warfighting experiments through each of our centers of excellence is certainly, that's generally the feeder event into our experimentation pathway. Any of our labs in U.S. Army DevCom is another important pathway. I do think, too, just to pile on to what Marcia said, agile, growth over time. It can't be the F-35 that you keep forever.
Yeah.
Tranches of capability that, just like Kids don't keep their iPhones for more than a couple of years before they want the newest iPhone with the newest cameras. The same applies to the technology, and I know that's going to be critical, that over time it's got to be able to evolve. That's a critical entry consideration.
General Brunson, nations across the Indo-Pacific have varying capabilities based on research, FMS, which we talked about, and budgets. How does the joint coalition build capabilities across multiple cultures, dialects, and skill sets to maintain a network of deterrence in the region?
I think that, when you look at the schools of interoperability, you've got human, procedural, and technological. I believe, honestly, that as a Corps commander, my focus is on the first two, not the latter. The latter is going to be determined by budgets and folks with money in their pockets. But what I can ensure is that in terms of nation to nation, the way that we're communicating, the things that we're making our partners a part of, understanding the ways that they fight, again, that leans toward assuring them that we're taking into account the ways that they accomplish their objectives. I think that's my part of the fight. I don't busy myself with worrying a lot about the technological things that nations have. My job's to be able to put us, the Corps, in the best position to secure the objectives placed before us, and to do that alongside my partners in a coalition sort of framework, or with the joint force, is to provide the things that my secretary says that the Army provides, one of which is C2. So I've got to be able to do command and control no matter where we are. That requires a network to do that. There are some technological things that we have to bring to be the best partner that we can be. But I think if there's a increased importance on the human and procedural interoperability, then when it comes, whether it's competition, crisis, or conflict, we'll be set when we show up in a place because we'll be valued.
TX, Dr. Hamas, given your comments on the F-35 and the carriers, what do you recommend that the land forces should invest in now?
Land forces should be, again, to survive either at sea or on land, you've got to either have overhead cover, which you of course can't get at sea, or you got to play Where's Waldo. You got to look like everybody else. So while I think Typhoon is a great idea, and it's in a big tractor trailer, make it look like a civilian tractor trailer. Also get it off the tractor trailer and put it in a container. Container is multimodal. So soldiers can fight from a sea platform. The Iranians just put a container on some kind of a barge and shot a anti-ship cruise missile off it. That makes you truly intermodal. The other thing and beauty of a 20-foot or 40-foot container, most ports throughout Asia can handle containers. You'll have a crane to lift them ashore. You can get a mechanical, a container ship with its own crane, lift it ashore, and then buy the truck and buy the trailer. And then you really look like a local. And I think that's, I did a ne'er-do-well tour with the CIA for a while. And often our escape plan was they gave you a belt with gold coins in it. Figure it out. Why can't we do that for battery commanders? You have to have your weapons, you have to have your comm. Transportation, food, water, some medical care. Hey, here's a pile of money, make sure you spend it wisely. That sort of a concept changes the logistics situation dramatically too. We're not trying to move huge amounts of water, we're just buying it locally. We're not trying to move a lot of food. There's 105 million people in the Philippines. You put 100,000 soldiers in there, it's not even a blip on their food market. That's the kind of thoughts we've got to think through. So think differently.
So General Hodney, I wanted to go back. There's a question, and then I wanted to ask you about if there was any banner highlights from PC C4, but it also ties into the question, given the rapid cycle of adaptation we've seen in Ukraine, as quick as 2 weeks that we've seen potentially, how has this influenced the design of the experiments that you're conducting at Futures and the technologies that you're going to be integrated to transfer the force?
Yeah, no, thanks. Over 200 technologies, demonstrated not just U.S., but across allies and partners, Project Convergence, Capstone, both Part A, Part B. The official insights reports will be coming out here shortly, but I would tell you, things like extending simple things like aerial tier network expansion, where formations were operating and they were wondering, wow, we can continue to talk because there was an unmanned aerial system, solar powered, that was airborne for multiple days, that was able to provide that, that network retrans capability. That certainly is a highlight. I think a lot of folks walked away understanding the potential of human-machine integrated formations when they saw the live fire demonstrated at Fort Irwin, California, and from the range of soldiers at the squad level employing unmanned aerial systems. I mean, it changes the scope when company commanders now have extended ranges that go beyond the organic mortar systems they might have in a light company, but actually able to have precision effects, at echelon is certainly something that was impressive. Watching the robotic formation that was at the forward line of troops, that was essentially able to engage with javelin systems, machine gun systems, robotic breaching capacity with a MICLIC on a robotic combat vehicle. So, and even just tactically, when you watched a tank, a manned tank come in and provide suppressive fires with the robots to the front, your surface danger zone, calculations are different when there's an unmanned system to your front as opposed to a manned formation that you have to account for, and certainly, you would be masking those fires. So a lot of potential there in so many different ways. The lists of firsts and firsts and bests kind of insights were, probably extensive. I forgot the second. Was there the second question? Can you repeat that for me?
No, I think you answered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Thanks.
Ms. Holmes, and you've touched on this already, but just to expound on it, how does the department ensure alignment of the requirements, the technology development, and the acquisition across the services to deliver an integrated multi-domain solution?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, and one that I thought was already being done when I got to OSD. I thought that was an easy answer. But it lies in, there's a new DoD directive called 7045.20. It's called Capability Portfolio Management. And the Joint Staff is responsible for capability portfolio management reviews. And those capability portfolio management reviews kind of gives you the state of play against a portfolio. Second to that is what OSD ANS runs as an integrated acquisition portfolio review. So they'll do a CPMR. ANS will come in with an IAPR and say, here are all the things across the acquisition lifecycle that we think we're building to support that portfolio. But there's always gaps in that. So new this year in 24 is an OSD R&E-led technology modernization transition review. And that's going to lay out all of the technology modernization, the science and technology, the industry development, what's going on in academia, so that you can clearly see for every portfolio, here's what we're doing for acquisition, and here's the technology that we can roll in on the back end to help fill those gaps. And I didn't guess or recognize that wasn't being done. And now that whole integrated portfolio management is going to allow us to get after the gaps and have a more robust portfolio against requirements, acquisition, and technology development.
And can I just add, internal, specific to the Army, we've examined, talked about the concept required capabilities, and what we've done is tied, what the roadmap, what requirements yield our ability to execute those capabilities, and there's a lot of, our S&T efforts aligned to those concept required capabilities is certainly a critical aspect of that.
And those are captured in the portfolio management reviews, which then reflect across all the services that can say, well, the Army's filling that, has this capability that fills this gap, right?
That's exactly right.
Great path forward.
Okay, so we're about at the end of our time here. I did want to give the panel the opportunity to any closing comments and cover something that they didn't cover in the question and answer session. General Brunson, we'll start with you, sir.
No, thank you for your great hosting duties and moderating of us up here. And thanks to everybody who's taken the time to attend, not just this talk on behalf of all the panelists, but to attend LandPAC writ large to sew together this network. I think that the challenges that we have in this region are absolutely legion. But the opportunities that we have in this region far outpace any of the challenges that we have, because there's a recognition that the solutions that are required for us in this region are going to require everybody and the people that we represent who's in this room right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
No, thanks, Chairman. I'm going to echo General Brunson's thanks to AUSA and everyone for being out here at LandPAC. Thanks to our fellow panel members for great discussion here. The thing I would leave is a thanks to everyone for participating in our experimentation efforts. Frankly, the collective recognition of, the sum is greater than its parts, the collective recognition that we all play a role in achieving these solutions is really important, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's very encouraging to see we're moving in the direction we are. We're getting to payloads, not platforms. And even more important, we're understanding better the role of friends and allies in the area. If we can provide these inexpensive weapons and platforms, then they can be full partners. I mean, if we can't sell them an F-35, because we can't even keep it running ourselves. But if we start to get things that work, then the geography lends itself to, we do have interior lines. And we can win in those interior lines.
So again, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to address this beautiful audience and be on this very esteemed panel. I haven't been with the OSD that long, but I have learned a lot. And I've seen the change in direction. I was with the Army at the height of modernization, and I've been watching all the wonderful things that are rolling out and that are truly being used in a joint fight. And now I can see the application at that strategic level of the fruits of the labor and the inclusion in this theater that maybe wasn't always there in the past. So congratulations to the Army for the hard work that they've put in and for the movements that we're making in this region with our allies and partners. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the great questions, and that concludes the panel for today.